Damn them all for thinking I'd stay quiet, for thinking I'd ever come. My name is Riley, and this is the story of how I went from the forgotten daughter to the woman they never saw coming. It starts with a lie, ends with a locked door, and somewhere in between, I uncovered a truth that shattered everything they built. My name is Riley, and when I close my eyes, I can still see every detail of that little kitchen, bathed in soft, golden sunlight. It's funny how memories work, sometimes so vivid they hurt, yet comforting enough to revisit again and again. At 8 years old, my world was simple. Pancakes on Sunday mornings, laughter bouncing off our thin walls, and bedtime stories whispered gently by my dad's deep, reassuring voice. We lived in a modest, worn-down house at the edge of a quiet street, with white paint peeling slightly around the windows. Mom often joked that it gave our home character, but Dad always promised he'd repaint it when things slow down at work. Still, the imperfections never mattered to me, because inside our house was warm and full of love, at least back then. Every morning, Dad would carry me to the kitchen table, pretending I was an airplane soaring through fluffy clouds. "Watch out! Here comes Riley Air, coming in for landing," he'd call out, making exaggerated airplane sounds until I squealed with laughter. Breakfast was always my favorite time of day. Mom, humming softly to herself, would flip pancakes on the skillet. Dad would sip his coffee, eyes sparkling, as I eagerly described whatever adventures I'd dreamed up overnight. Sometimes he'd nod seriously, leaning closer, eyebrows raised. "And then what happened, Riley? Did the dragon ever catch you?" "No way," I'd say triumphantly. "I always escape." "I knew you would," he'd reply, smiling proudly, before stealing another pancake from my plate. Mom would shake her head affectionately, trying not to smile. "Honestly, you too." Those mornings felt safe, endless, and perfectly ordinary, as though nothing in the world could ever change our tiny family. After breakfast, Dad would swing me onto his shoulders, dropping me off at school with a promise to return that felt as steady and dependable as sunrise. Afternoons were quieter, but I loved those too. Mom would greet me at the front door, apron dusted lightly with flour, and I'd tell her everything about my day. What Tommy spilled at lunch, what math problems were tricky, how Mrs. Miller read us stories in silly voices. "I missed you, Mom," I'd say every single day, hugging her waist tightly. She'd brush the hair from my eyes and kiss my forehead gently. "I missed you too, sweetheart. Let's bake something special for Dad, shall we?" And we would. Our kitchen would fill with the sweet smell of chocolate chip cookies or apple pie, and I'd sit cross-legged on the counter, swinging my legs happily, feeling utterly content. There were no clouds in my sky, no shadows that hinted of storms to come. At night, Dad would kneel by my bed, his strong, comforting presence filling the room. "Sleep tight, my brave girl," he'd whisper, tucking the covers carefully around me. "Good night, Daddy. Good night, Mommy," I'd murmur, sinking into dreams with the absolute certainty that tomorrow would be exactly the same. I never wondered about pain, loss, or fear, not really. Those things seemed like abstract ideas, far off and unreal. But life has a way of changing in a single heartbeat, of shifting from a soft lullaby into a harsh, unending silence. I still remember the last evening when everything was ordinary. Dad arrived home later than usual, looking unusually pale. Mom's laughter had seemed quieter, strained. I hadn't noticed it then, not truly, because I was just a child, unaware of the tiny cracks beginning to form beneath our feet. The next morning began with a strange mix of excitement and unease. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, warm yet oddly harsh. Mom's pancakes smelled sweeter, but her movements seemed distracted. Dad's eyes didn't sparkle. They were heavy, like storm clouds rolling in. "Sweetheart," Dad began, voice trembling slightly as he took my hand in his. "There's something important we need to talk about." My heart fluttered nervously. What could be so important? Did I do something wrong? Why did his voice sound so strange, so fragile? My fingers tightened instinctively around his, feeling a chill I'd never felt from his touch before. My stomach twisted slightly, anxiety fluttering inside me like butterflies trapped in a jar. I glanced quickly at Mom, hoping for reassurance, but her eyes were lowered, focusing intensely on the tabletop, as if the worn wood grain might somehow give her answers. "What is it, Daddy?" I asked softly, barely above a whisper, afraid somehow that speaking louder might break something fragile that hung between us. He hesitated, his eyes shimmering with tears he'd never shown me before, and my heart began racing wildly, suddenly desperate to escape whatever he was about to say. I wanted to run back into yesterday, to those ordinary pancakes, silly stories, and airplane rides. I didn't want this strange new world where my father's eyes held pain and my mother's smile had disappeared. "Riley, sweetheart." He paused again, drawing a shaky breath as Mom finally reached over, gripping his other hand tightly, her knuckles turning white. I went to the doctor yesterday, and there's something wrong. They found cancer." Cancer. The word hovered awkwardly in the air, heavy, unfamiliar. I'd heard adults whisper about it before, in hushed tones at school or on TV, but it had never felt real. Now, suddenly, it was part of our life, my dad's life. "What does that mean, Daddy?" My voice quivered, eyes searching his face desperately for clarity. Dad swallowed hard, forcing a weak smile. "It means I'm sick, Riley. It means things might change for a little while, but we're going to fight it together, okay? Everything will be fine." Mom nodded quickly, though tears betrayed her bravery, spilling silently down her cheeks. "We're going to be okay," she echoed, her voice choked but determined. "You'll see." I nodded back, pretending to understand, to believe, though inside I felt lost. Could sickness really steal away the dad who carried me effortlessly on his shoulders? Could something so scary happen in a house full of love? I pushed those thoughts away, choosing instead to cling desperately to his shaky reassurance. "Okay," I whispered bravely, squeezing Dad's trembling fingers. "We'll fight it." For a brief moment, a tiny smile lit Dad's face, as though my courage had sparked some strength within him. But as I glanced around our tiny kitchen, the chipped mugs, Mom's apron still dusted with flour, sunlight streaming cruelly bright through the window, I felt a terrifying new question forming deep inside me. What if everything wasn't going to be fine? I didn't voice it. Instead, I tucked it away, buried beneath hope and the desperate need to trust my parents. But in that quiet instant, even as Dad wrapped me tightly in his weakening arms and Mom gently stroked my hair, I felt the first shadows stretching over my perfect little world, knowing deep down that nothing would ever be the same again. In the weeks that followed, our cozy house transformed into something unrecognizable. The bright, carefree mornings were replaced by quiet whispers, anxious glances, and endless visits from people I barely knew. Doctors wearing stern faces shuffled through our living room, their voices hushed as though protecting me from words too painful to hear. Relatives came bearing forced smiles and casseroles, patting my head awkwardly before slipping into hushed conversations with Mom in corners of the house. I watched from the doorway, silent and invisible, absorbing fragments of adult talk that made little sense to me. Chemo, prognosis, treatment options. My world had expanded too quickly, flooded with words too heavy for my 8-year-old heart. Every night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with thoughts I couldn't share. Was Dad going to be okay? Were they hiding something from me? Why wouldn't anyone tell me what was really happening? One evening, after yet another exhausting round of doctor visits, I sat cross-legged beside Dad on the worn living room couch. He looked pale, his once strong frame now noticeably thinner. I tried to ignore it, stubbornly refusing to see the reality. "Dad," I whispered softly, leaning into his shoulder, "will you still read me bedtime stories?" He turned, eyes softening despite their fatigue, and smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on mine. "Always, Riley. Nothing will ever stop me from telling stories to my favorite girl." A surge of relief washed over me, bringing tears I quickly blinked away. "Promise?" "Promise," he repeated firmly, though a quiet cough betrayed his effort. As days turned into months, Dad's illness gradually took over every aspect of our lives. The strong, playful father who had once swung me effortlessly onto his shoulders now moved slowly through the house, stopping often to catch his breath. Each morning, Mom diligently prepared his medications, her eyes tired but determined. Sometimes I'd find her sitting alone in the kitchen, staring silently at the clock, shoulders trembling softly. My heart ached to comfort her, but I never knew what to say. At school, my teachers spoke to me gently, classmates casting cautious, curious glances as if I'd suddenly become fragile. I hated their pitying eyes, their careful whispers behind my back. Even my best friend Sophie seemed unsure how to talk to me anymore. It felt as if I were standing behind a thick glass wall, separated from everyone else by this strange new sadness. One night, unable to sleep, I slipped quietly down the hallway toward my parents' bedroom. Their door was slightly ajar, and through the thin gap I glimpsed Mom kneeling beside Dad, her hand tightly gripping his. Her voice, usually so strong, was shaking terribly. "I don't know if I can do this, Daniel," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I'm so scared." Dad's response came softly, reassuring but tired. "You're stronger than you know, Charlotte. We'll get through it, somehow." I stood frozen, feeling guilty for intruding on such a private moment, but unable to tear myself away. In that instant, the harsh reality struck me clearly, piercing through my childish innocence. My parents were afraid. If they didn't know what was coming, how could I possibly feel safe? My small body trembled as I tiptoed silently back to my room, heart heavy with a weight I didn't fully understand but knew I had to carry alone. Days blurred together, marked only by hospital visits, bitter medicines, and quiet dinners. But even as everything changed, Dad kept his promise. Each night, he gathered whatever strength remained, settling himself beside me with a book. His voice, once strong and resonant, had grown quieter, softer, like a delicate thread I desperately clung to. Then came the evening when his voice faltered completely, mid-sentence, and he closed the book gently, smiling weakly. "I'm sorry, Riley," he whispered, tears brimming in his tired eyes. "Daddy's a little tired tonight." I nodded quickly, swallowing the lump in my throat. "It's okay, Daddy." He leaned forward slowly, kissing my forehead gently, lingering longer than usual, as though memorizing the feel of me beneath his lips. "You know I love you, right?" he asked softly, eyes searching mine intently. "Yes, Daddy. I love you too," I whispered back, gripping his hand as tightly as I dared, terrified of letting go. As he left the room slowly, painfully, the weight of the moment pressed down upon me heavily. That night, staring wide-eyed into darkness, I felt an emptiness begin to open within my heart. A quiet, unspoken truth filled me with dread. What if that had been our last bedtime story? The answer to my silent fear came sooner than I ever imagined. One cold, gray afternoon, just days after my 10th birthday, our little home fell into a hushed darkness that made the air feel thick and heavy. Mom's quiet sobbing had ceased, replaced by a silence more terrifying than any sound I'd ever known. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching strangers move slowly through our house, their faces solemn, eyes lowered respectfully. Everything around me blurred into muted shades of sorrowful gray, punctuated by the soft murmurs of condolences and words I barely heard, words I didn't want to hear. At the funeral, dressed in an uncomfortable black dress Mom had bought just yesterday, I clung desperately to her trembling hand. My eyes searched desperately through a crowd of shadowy figures, wishing for Dad's warm, familiar face to appear, laughing, reassuring me that it was all just a terrible mistake. Instead, I saw only unfamiliar relatives, their whispered condolences feeling empty and hollow. White flowers covered Dad's casket like a cold blanket, their sweetness sharp and suffocating. My throat tightened painfully as Mom's grip grew even tighter, her eyes distant, staring blankly ahead as though she had vanished somewhere far away. That night, sitting alone in my bed, I pressed Dad's worn storybook to my chest, sobbing softly. I'd believed him when he promised he'd always be there. Why did he have to leave me? How could I ever feel safe again? I felt abandoned, small, helpless, a child suddenly forced into a frightening new world. Just 1 week later, Mom called me gently into the living room, her voice strained and hesitant. I sat stiffly on the edge of our old sofa, the fabric suddenly scratchy and uncomfortable beneath my fingertips. "Riley," she began softly, twisting the hem of her shirt nervously, unable to meet my eyes. "I've spoken with Grandma Lily, and we think it's best if you stay with her for a little while." My heart plummeted, panic gripping me tight. "Why?" I whispered, voice trembling. "Can't I stay here with you? Did I do something wrong?" "Oh, sweetheart," Mom whispered, brushing my hair softly, but her hand felt cold and distant, unfamiliar. No, you didn't do anything wrong. It's me, Riley. I need some time to figure things out, to heal, just for a while, I promise." I wanted to scream, to cry out that I needed her too, that I was scared, that I didn't want to lose her as well. Instead, I swallowed hard, choking back tears, whispering only, "Okay." The following day, Grandma Lily's old car pulled quietly into our driveway. She greeted me gently, her voice warm but cautious, eyes filled with sadness. We drove silently to her modest house, my hands clenched tightly on my lap, eyes fixed on the blurred scenery passing by, my heart aching with an unbearable longing for the life that had been stolen from me. Months passed slowly at Grandma Lily's. Although she tried tirelessly to comfort me, making my favorite meals and telling stories about Dad's childhood antics, nothing could replace the emptiness left behind by Mom's distant silence. Her phone calls grew sparse, always brief, always ending the same way. "When can I come home, Mom?" "Just a little longer, Riley, I promise." But the longer I stayed away, the less her promises meant. Each call felt shorter, colder, leaving me questioning if she even missed me at all. Then came the day that changed everything again, shattering the fragile hopes I'd tried desperately to preserve. Doing math homework at Grandma's kitchen table, I heard the sharp crunch of gravel under tires. Through the window, I saw Mom stepping gracefully from a shiny black SUV, radiant and poised, as though the last 2 painful years had never touched her. Beside her, in the driver's seat, was an unfamiliar man, distant, indifferent. The front door burst open and Mom rushed toward me, beaming as if delivering wonderful news. "Riley! Oh, sweetheart, I have such great news!" Grandma Lily appeared quietly from the living room, her eyes sharp with caution. "Charlotte, what's this about?" Mom turned, her smile unwavering, and grabbed my hands tightly, eyes bright with excitement. "I'm getting married. His name is Dean, and he has 2 lovely daughters your age. Our family's going to be whole again." Her words, intended as reassurance, struck deep, igniting a swirl of confusion, betrayal, and resentment inside me. I glanced again at the stranger in the car, the silent man who refused even to look toward the house. And suddenly, with a painful clarity, I understood what Mom hadn't said. Her whole family had already been redefined, and it no longer included me. Life with Mom's new family quickly became a silent, exhausting struggle. From the first night in the house that felt painfully unfamiliar, I understood that my role had shifted from daughter to intruder. Dean barely acknowledged me, offering only forced smiles whenever Mom was looking. Chloe and Madison, my new sisters, made no effort to hide their disdain. Their laughter was sharp, cutting, filled with secret jokes and whispers I was never meant to hear. Every evening, Dean came home and lifted the girls into his arms, his face lighting up as though he hadn't seen them in years. "How are my 2 princesses today?" he'd coo, kissing their foreheads lovingly. Mom would greet him with a kiss, the picture of a perfect, loving wife, completely absorbed in her newfound happiness. And then there was me, always standing in the corner, awkward and unsure, waiting for a greeting or a glance that never came. At dinner, conversations flowed around me, effortlessly avoiding my presence as though I were invisible. "How was your day at school, Chloe?" Mom would ask sweetly, her eyes shining. Chloe would smirk, glancing quickly at me before responding with exaggerated stories that always ended in laughter from everyone at the table, except me. One night, in a desperate attempt to join the conversation, I quietly mentioned an award I'd received at school. "I made the honor roll today," I offered softly, voice small but hopeful. Dean barely paused, continuing to slice his steak. Mom smiled faintly, distant and distracted. "That's nice, Riley," she said absently, before quickly turning back to Madison, her eyes lighting up again. "Did you finish your painting, sweetie?" My chest tightened painfully, humiliation burning my cheeks. I lowered my eyes to my untouched plate, choking back tears. I learned quickly after that night to keep silent, to shrink further into myself, hoping to become truly invisible. Yet even invisibility couldn't shield me from Chloe and Madison's cruelty. Christmas arrived like an elaborate performance, glittering and carefully choreographed. Presents piled high beneath the sparkling tree. Designer clothes, expensive gadgets, luxurious surprises for Chloe and Madison. Mom handed me a small, crumpled package, her smile nervous, forced. I opened it slowly, feeling the eyes of everyone watching. Inside lay an old, refurbished phone and some clearance sweaters. Madison leaned close, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear, "At least you got something, Riley. Isn't that enough?" Later, I locked the gift safely in my drawer, hoping to protect it, the only evidence that I still mattered, even a little. But returning from school one afternoon, I found the phone shattered, lying carelessly beside a note scribbled hastily. "No one needs leftovers in this house." Shaking with anger, I showed Mom the broken pieces, desperation spilling over in my voice. Look what they did. Can't you see what's happening? She sighed heavily, tired and irritated. Riley, stop blaming everything on your sisters. You need to grow up. Her words cut deeper than any insult from Chloe or Madison ever could. My own mother refused to see me, to defend me. In that moment, something inside me fractured irreparably. The final blow came months later. One spring afternoon, Mom's voice trembled as she shared her exciting news. Riley, Dean and I are having a baby. You'll finally have a little brother. My stomach dropped painfully. Before I could respond, she continued, voice carefully measured. And because we need space, you'll move in with Chloe and Madison. Your room will become the nursery. No, I whispered hoarsely, shaking my head desperately. That room was mine. Dad chose it for me. Don't be selfish, Mom snapped, voice sharp, impatient. This is your family now, Riley. You have to adjust. This isn't family, I cried, voice rising with fury. You're pushing me out, replacing me. You've taken everything else, why not this too? Silence fell sharply, thick and tense. Dean's eyes narrowed disapprovingly. Chloe and Madison stood quietly nearby, exchanging triumphant glances. Mom said nothing, her eyes cold, distant. From that day forward, I ceased to exist in their world. I became a ghost, seen but not acknowledged, breathing but not truly living, a stranger trapped within the walls of what should have been my home. Night after night, curled up in a corner of my shared bedroom, I whispered bitter truths to myself. If this was family, then perhaps I never truly had one at all. Months blurred into years, my loneliness hardening into a quiet determination. At 13, my existence had become silent endurance. A ghost drifting through corridors filled with laughter that was never meant for me. But beneath my carefully blank expression, something inside me simmered quietly, waiting, perhaps hoping for a moment to finally break free. That moment arrived one humid summer evening. I'd just returned from school, slipping silently past Chloe and Madison, who were huddled together on the living room couch, giggling over their phones. Dean's voice carried softly from the kitchen, calm yet oddly secretive. Curious, I paused outside the kitchen door, ears catching fragments of a whispered conversation. Just play along, Mom's voice murmured reassuringly. Riley will agree, she always does. It's just money, Dean. My heart pounded sharply, confusion turning swiftly into dread. Edging closer, I strained to listen, fear squeezing my chest. Charlotte, we've already taken enough, Dean argued quietly. You really think Riley's that naive? Trust me, Mom replied smoothly. She's desperate for affection. She won't even notice. She's always been easy to fool. I stumbled backward, my legs suddenly weak. My breath caught painfully, the sting of betrayal burning fiercely. Was this all I was to them? A naive child, easily manipulated, nothing more than a resource to drain? A sickening clarity washed over me. All their forced smiles, their hollow kindness, it had never been real. My entire life with them was built on deception, an elaborate game designed to exploit my longing for a family. Later that night, I lay awake, heart thundering restlessly. Questions stormed through my mind relentlessly, leaving me raw and exhausted. How could my own mother treat me this way? Didn't she care at all? Had she truly become someone I no longer recognized? Determined to confirm my suspicions, I waited until the house fell silent. Quietly, heart racing, I dialed Grandma Lily's number, the only voice of comfort left in my world. Her voice answered immediately, soothing and strong. Grandma? I whispered, struggling not to cry. Can I come live with you again? I can't stay here anymore. Oh, sweetheart, she breathed softly, her voice full of quiet understanding. You've always belonged here with me. Stay where you are. I'm coming. As I waited anxiously, the house felt colder, emptier than ever. Outside, the gentle hum of Grandma Lily's car signaled freedom, yet my heart ached fiercely at the thought of leaving behind what little remained of my childhood home. Slipping quietly through the kitchen, I glimpsed my family gathered around the TV, oblivious, laughing comfortably as though my presence had never mattered. Had they truly never loved me, or had I simply been too blind to notice? Stepping outside into the cool night air, Grandma Lily welcomed me silently into her arms, holding me securely as tears finally spilled freely down my face. You're safe now, she whispered fiercely, stroking my hair. I won't let anyone hurt you again. Driving back to Grandma's house, silence filled the car, yet it was comforting. a shared understanding needing no words. As we pulled up to her familiar house, my heart swelled with relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I had finally come home. In the days that followed, Grandma Lily's house wrapped around me like a gentle embrace. Meals were warm and comforting, conversations genuine, filled with laughter, instead of hidden meanings. Slowly, quietly, I began to heal beneath her unwavering love. Then, one quiet afternoon, Grandma Lily called me gently into the living room, her eyes bright but serious. "Riley, I spoke with your mother," she said carefully. "She's agreed to sign custody over to me permanently. If you want, we can make it official." My heart soared, relief mingling with a profound sadness. How easily Mom had signed me away, her own daughter, without hesitation. Yet as Grandma reached out to clasp my trembling hands, warmth filled the emptiness left by years of neglect. "Do you really want me, Grandma?" I whispered softly, vulnerable and aching. "Oh, Riley," she said tenderly, pulling me close, "I've always wanted you. You've always been my child in every way that matters." In that quiet, life-changing moment, as tears fell freely, I realized that family wasn't simply a matter of blood. It was found in love, trust, and unwavering acceptance. With Grandma Lily's gentle embrace surrounding me, I finally understood what home truly felt like. And from that day forward, I vowed never again to settle for anything less. The weeks after the court hearing felt like waking up from a long, painful dream. On the day the judge officially granted Grandma Lily custody and approved the adoption, I held the pen with a trembling but determined hand. Signing my name felt like reclaiming something I'd lost long ago. My identity, my worth, my right to be loved without conditions. When we stepped out of the small courthouse into the afternoon sun, Grandma squeezed my hand. "You don't have to fight anymore, Riley." I glimpsed my family gathered around the TV, oblivious, laughing comfortably as though my presence had never mattered. Had they truly never loved me, or had I simply been too blind to notice? Stepping outside into the cool night air, Grandma Lily welcomed me silently into her arms, holding me securely as tears finally spilled freely down my face. "You're safe now," she whispered fiercely, stroking my hair. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." Driving back to Grandma's house, silence filled the car, yet it was comforting, a shared understanding needing no words. As we pulled up to her familiar house, my heart swelled with relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I had finally come home. In the days that followed, Grandma Lily's house wrapped around me like a gentle embrace. Meals were warm and comforting, conversations genuine, filled with laughter instead of hidden meanings. Slowly, quietly, I began to heal beneath her unwavering love. Then, one quiet afternoon, Grandma Lily called me gently into the living room, her eyes bright but serious. "Riley, I spoke with your mother," she said carefully. "She's agreed to sign custody over to me permanently. If you want, we can make it official." My heart soared, relief mingling with a profound sadness. How easily Mom had signed me away, her own daughter, without hesitation. Yet as Grandma reached out to clasp my trembling hands, warmth filled the emptiness left by years of neglect. "Do you really want me, Grandma?" I whispered softly, vulnerable and aching. "Oh, Riley," she said tenderly, pulling me close. "I've always wanted you. You've always been my child in every way that matters." In that quiet, life-changing moment, as tears fell freely, I realized that family wasn't simply a matter of blood. It was found in love, trust, and unwavering acceptance. With Grandma Lily's gentle embrace surrounding me, I finally understood what home truly felt like. And from that day forward, I vowed never again to settle for anything less. The weeks after the court hearing felt like waking up from a long, painful dream. On the day the judge officially granted Grandma Lily custody and approved the adoption, I held the pen with a trembling but determined hand. Signing my name felt like reclaiming something I'd lost long ago, my identity, my worth, my right to be loved without conditions. When we stepped out of the small courthouse into the afternoon sun, Grandma squeezed my hand. "You don't have to fight anymore, Riley," she whispered. "From now on, you're exactly where you belong." For the first time in years, I believed her. Life in Grandma's modest home wasn't luxurious, but it was full of warmth. Every morning started with the scent of toast and cinnamon drifting from the kitchen. I did my homework at the same old wooden table where I'd once sat crying. Now I scribbled notes while Grandma sipped tea beside me, offering gentle corrections or stories from Dad's childhood to make me laugh. She never brought up the past unless I asked. But one night, while we baked cookies together, I finally worked up the courage. "Why do you think Mom let me go so easily?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the dough. Grandma paused, then said gently, "Because she didn't know how to hold on to what truly mattered. But I do, and I always will." That simple truth filled a hole in my heart that had been aching for years. By the time I entered high school, I had transformed. I studied harder than anyone, driven by a quiet fire to prove I was more than the girl they left behind. I made the honor roll every year. And at every ceremony, Grandma Lily sat front row, clapping louder than anyone else, tears shining in her eyes. When I was 17, I applied to State University with shaking hands and hopeful eyes. The acceptance letter came on a breezy Tuesday morning. Not only was I in, but I had also earned a partial scholarship. I rushed into the kitchen waving the letter, breathless with excitement. "Grandma, I got in, and a scholarship too." She dropped her wooden spoon, eyes filling with tears. "You did it, Riley. Your dad would be so proud of you." That night, she pulled out a worn folder from the drawer and placed it gently in front of me. "I started this for you after your father passed," she said. "It's not much, but I saved every penny I could. I wanted to make sure you had choices." Inside was more than enough to cover what the scholarship didn't. I couldn't speak. I just hugged her tightly, overcome by the kind of love that didn't need to be spoken aloud to be understood. College was hard. The city was loud and fast, and the dorms were cold and lonely at first. I missed the kitchen smells, Grandma's stories, and the way the sunlight slanted across her porch in the late afternoons. But I carried her with me, in my routines, in my locket, in the way I refused to give up, even when the workload felt like too much. 4 years passed in a blink. I graduated with honors, walking across the stage to the sound of cheers, and the memory of a voice that once whispered bedtime stories in a room I no longer lived in. I landed a job at Clarendon & Pierce, a top-tier firm in the city, as a project manager assistant. The work was demanding, the expectations high, but I was ready. Every skill I'd built, every scar I carried, had made me stronger. Then came the call I had quietly feared for years. It was Grandma Lily's lawyer. His voice was soft. "You should come home, Riley. She doesn't have much time." I dropped everything. In the hospital room, Grandma lay quietly, her body thinner, her voice fainter, but her eyes, still warm, lit up when she saw me. "I knew you'd come," she smiled. I held her hand tightly. "I'm here. Always." Over the next few weeks, I spent every free moment by her side. I read to her, told her about work, and described the future we had dreamed about. She listened, nodding, always proud, always present. On my graduation day, she was too weak to attend, so I live-streamed the ceremony to her hospital room. When I crossed the stage, I looked into the camera, smiled, and blew her a kiss. Later that evening, still in my gown, I sat by her bedside, clutching my diploma. "You did it," she whispered, her hand in mine. "Now I can rest easy. You're strong enough to walk on your own." She passed away that night, peacefully, still holding my hand. Her funeral was quiet, just like she would have wanted. I stood by her grave, the locket heavy in my hand, filled with pictures of her and Dad, two people who had given me everything when they had no reason to. A few weeks later, her lawyer called me back into the office. "She left you everything," he said gently. "The house, her savings, even a few small investments." He handed me a letter. Cream-colored, delicate handwriting. "My dearest Riley, I knew one day you'd walk without me, but I also knew you'd be ready. The house, the savings, these aren't burdens. They're seeds. Grow something beautiful. You deserve that. I love you. I always have." I held the letter to my chest and wept, not from grief this time, but from gratitude. I had been loved truly, deeply, selflessly, and I would carry that love forward every step of the way. In the weeks that followed, I returned to Grandma Lily's house, now my house, walking through each room with reverence, as if the walls still whispered her name. Every creak in the floorboards, every familiar scent, every sunbeam slanting through the old lace curtains reminded me, she built this life for me. I spent days cleaning, fixing, and rearranging, not to erase the past, but to honor it, slowly turning the house into my own while preserving her love in every corner. The cinnamon jar stayed right where she left it. The wooden table, where I once cried over math problems and later celebrated scholarship letters, remained untouched. Eventually, I made the decision that broke my heart. I put the house up for sale. Not because I wanted to let go, but because I knew Grandma would have wanted me to move forward, to chase the life she fought so hard to give me. A young couple with a baby bought the house. When I saw them giggling on the porch, arms full of grocery bags and joy, I knew it was the right choice. The house would have laughter again. With the money from the sale, my savings, and a promotion I'd recently earned, I found a modest apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. A cozy 17th floor unit with big windows that looked out over the trees of Central Park. Every morning, I sat with a cup of coffee in hand, watching the light stretch over the city, breathing in the quiet power of peace. I no longer searched for love in broken people. I stopped answering texts from Chloe and Madison. I let the silence stretch with my mother until it became permanent. Not out of hate, but out of self-respect. That chapter was closed, and it would never reopen. Instead, I poured my energy into rebuilding the kind of life I once thought only existed in books. I worked hard, climbed the ladder at Clarendon and Pierce, and found not just success, but purpose. I volunteered, mentored interns who reminded me of who I used to be. I built something that was mine. But what changed me most wasn't the job or the apartment. It was the people. I met Sophia, a colleague in planning, who invited me to a weekend dinner with friends who, like me, came from fractured beginnings. We became a family of our own, one stitched together not by blood but by choice. We had potlucks and fire pit evenings in Central Park. We celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes and bad karaoke. There was no manipulation, no silent accusations, just honesty, just warmth, just home. One night, sitting beside the fire, Sophia handed me a steaming mug of cocoa and said, "You know, family isn't who you're born to, it's who stays with you, even when they don't have to." Her words sank deep into the spaces where old wounds used to live. I looked around at the people around me, laughing, teasing, talking about dreams and taxes and heartbreak. None of them were related to me, and yet I had never felt more seen, more loved. Family can betray you, love never will. Grandma Lily had shown me that. Not through grand gestures, but through the quiet ones. Tea on hard days, saved pennies in an envelope, bedtime stories when she was tired. She had taught me that real love was the kind that asked for nothing and gave everything. One crisp spring morning, I returned to the cemetery with a bouquet of pale blue hydrangeas, her favorite. The sky was clear, the breeze soft. I knelt beside her headstone, gently brushing away a few fallen petals. "I found it, Grandma," I whispered, laying the flowers down. "Home. Right here, in the hearts that love me without asking anything in return." I closed my eyes, and for a brief moment I swore I could feel her hand in mine again, warm and steady, like it always had been. Life still brings storms. I still have lonely days and nights when the past whispers louder than I'd like, but I'm no longer that girl pressing her face against the window, waiting for someone to return. I am the woman who opened the door and walked forward. I carry my history not as a burden, but as a badge. I survived not because someone saved me, but because someone loved me and taught me how to save myself. My story began with abandonment, but it didn't end there. It ends with a choice to love myself, to protect my peace, to build something beautiful out of broken things, and to never again confuse shared blood with earned love. Because family isn't where we're born. It's where we're finally truly seen, and where we are loved the right way.